Hello and welcome back to my daily speed modeling challenge, where today we are making this anchor. All right, I suppose with that, our time starts now. So for this anchor, let's just hop on and find some reference, which is as always our step one. So let's just Google anchor and see what we've got. So I'm already torn in looking at these photos between doing something super realistic, like a modern day, like anchor. This is what you might see if you're out on someone's boat on like a lake or whatever, or between doing that or like an old-timey anchor like this, which could also be really fun. Now I'm between the two, I'm leaning towards the sort of old-timey anchor. I know that these also existed, so it's not that it's not realistic, but I think I just like this style much more. So I might even grab this as a reference image and sort of just trace this image as my as the model for today. Okay, so now that we have that saved, we can just add that as an image. We can go images as planes, hop into our daily study folder and add our anchor. Beautiful. We'll move that to the center, hop in a textured view real quick. And actually I just decided instead of images as planes, we'll add this as a reference image and we'll select the same image. And that'll be much better for our modeling purposes. So I'm okay with modeling this from the top view, and I'll start off with, again, the usual. We'll start with a plane and just model this out as we always do. One thing about an anchor is that it's completely symmetrical. So we can delete these vertices and add in that's the material, oops. And we can add in a mirror modifier to make the modeling process easier for us. We'll add clipping and we'll extrude along the X. There we go. Bring that in there. And it looks like we need to translate our reference image over just a bit. Move it just like that, select our plane, and that looks a bit more lined up to me. So for starters, it looks like we have this long, looks like fairly straight. Maybe it's a bit wider down here. We have this long, straight, sort of central, like a shaft of the anchor, which based on this photo, it looks to be like we have angular surfaces up until it sort of pinches off into this edge for the top of the, whatever the hook part of the anchor is called. So I think that's good there. We can add a loop cut here and extrude this out. And what we can do is use the control click method and scale this along the Y to 0, move this vert in, and then we can just take these and adjust these around a bit just to make it rounder. And I know that there's an add-on in, I believe, Loop Tools to make this process of making circles easier. So maybe it could be worth it to do that, but I don't think I'll bother with that at the moment. And we can spread this one out a bit, make it a bit more even, and then that should be all right. Except actually, I'm scrapping this because if this top handle is going to be flat, then if this like top shaft is going to be flat, then we want this to be round. So what we can actually do then is model this down and model this out. So I'll just extrude this down. And now that it's extruded down, we can start adding in some details. So why don't we start off with this bottom nub down here? We'll add a loop cut, move that down, move that in, then we can extrude, scale it up a bit, scale it down a bit, extrude, scale, extrude, scale, extrude, rotate, align the vertices, extrude, scale, extrude, scale, extrude, and scale. And that's the classic little workflow there. And to me, that seems about good for that base part of our anchor. And to make this into actual geometry, we can select this and add in a solidify modifier, make it nice and thick. And this can be done by extruding it as well. In fact, actually, why don't we do that with geometry? I changed my mind on the solidify modifier. We can take all of this and extrude it because we want to be able to play with the vertices afterwards. So we'll extrude it along the Z. That looks to be about right, according to my eyes. And I actually also want to add in a subdivision surface modifier. So maybe 2. What we can do is mark these edges here. We can take them and we can mark their seam just a bit, mark the crease rather, is a bit tighter, I suppose. Same here. Shift E, just flatten that out quite a ways. Now these faces, if we remember, have come to a point in the middle. So I'll add some definition in the middle there, and we can drag this down on the Z, or even if we want it to be symmetrical vertically, we can grab all those verts that are missing there, scale it on the Z, scale it down. So that looks sharp to me. And then same thing on these, except I don't want to mess with this geometry here too much. So instead, I'll just grab these points, make it like that, just to make it a bit easier on us. We can grab all the edge points basically, except for that one in the middle, scale it on the Z. So it's nice and pointy. And I also want to do it a little bit down here just to help accentuate the roundness of the item, of the anchor a bit. So that has a point, this has a point. I can maybe even bring this out a bit and make it a bit sharper, like so. And I suppose I'm happy with that as our base. Now for this torus shape. I believe there is a primitive torus. Awesome. So we can just move this. We can just move this up, scale it down, up a little bit, nudge it around a bit. And just to make sure it aligns on the side, we can move it up on the Z, and that's pretty much perfect. Now for this handle part, we can add a cylinder, move it to the center, rotate it on the Y by 90 degrees, and then very simply scale it down, move it along the Y, scale it down, turn on Alt-C to see our reference, and it does appear sort of above the handle. So now that it's at that proper size, I think how I'll do it is we can move it up, and that seems to be about good for that. So now we can scale it on everything except for on just the X direction, I mean, but edit mode, and we can add in some loop cuts. We can start with the outer two and move those like so along the X. Actually, no, we'll move them along the X to the most bulbous part. And this would be easier with a mirror modifier, but we're skipping that just because why bother? Scale on the X, do it slower, do there, rinse and repeat, it's X, slide it over there, rinse and repeat, it's X, slide it over there. Now we'll take these two, scale it on everything except for the X, do it like that, grab these, scale it on everything except for the X, like that. Last but not least, we need one more loop cut to about there. Select these, scale it on everything except the X, just like that. And that looks good to me, except maybe I want to add in some a subdivision surface modifier to smooth things out. Can add a subsurf, and I hate how subsurf handles the top of a cylinder like that. So what we'll do is we'll grab the tops and just mark the edge a bit flatter, maybe. No, it's not working. Maybe we'll add in more subdivisions, and then I'll mark these edges sharper, because even though I don't like how that is happening with the geometry over there, it'll work itself out whenever we shade smooth. So we'll make these creases sharper, and just like that, we have pretty much the basis of an anchor. So I'll Control J, join these guys together, object, shade smooth, and that is pretty much good for the mesh. We have the anchor there, it works beautifully. Awesome. So how much time do we have? So we got 17 minutes left, and how might we expand on this to make it a whole scene? Well, first off, I'll have to add some texture to it, and I could even just like image project this and make it sort of a hyper realistic kind of thing. But I think what I'll do is I'll go for a bit of an NPR look, and I'll add in a noise texture as the base, or as a mix color. So we'll add noise texture as the factor of a mix color, and we can just Control Shift click that, where what I'll do is I'll make it so it's rusty. So it looks like the base metal here is that there, and then there is another sort of orangey hue on top of it, and already that looks pretty good to my eyes. But if we use the principle of BSDF and then use a similar noise texture, or even the same noise texture, with a color ramp to serve as the roughness of our object, we can get a very real effect as to the roughness of this object. So we actually want this to be pretty rough, actually, or maybe move the stops down like that and move it up to highlight the fact that there are in fact shiny areas on this. Okay, beautiful. And the IOR here seems to be a bit high, so I'll turn it down, and it is indeed a metal, so we'll turn the metallic up as well. And there, it looks like the roughness is a bit much on the black side, so we can push it in just like that. And I actually want to crank the detail of this noise all the way up just to sort of sell the effect. So that looks good to me. I'm going for more of an NPR look, so I might go ahead and take this and apply an HSV, where I'll just turn the saturation of this up just a ways. I like the look of that. And also on shading, check it in the material view. We'll add in a sun. We'll give it a strength of 3, turn it that way. And I'm liking how our anchor is coming out in terms of how weathered it looks. Although I might add another layer of color to it, because I'm not happy with just the two mixes. So it looks like even these two should have some some kind of layering going on. So we'll just duplicate these. And for the rust, that can be sort of the light rust, and then this can be sort of a different color rust. And then for the metal, we can pick this guy. So now we have a couple different colors, and I'll use this two noise textures as the factor, But what I'll do is increase the scale on both of them to, you know, different amounts. And then we can use these as the colors instead of the, what's it called? Just the plain color. So that looks much better in terms of the variations in the color. And I might even increase the scale of our base noise, and then it's also too shiny in places. So I'll turn that down just a bit, and gorgeous. I love how it's turning out. So now that we have it mostly shaded. And yes, it looks good in the light too. Let's make a bit of an underwater scene, why don't we? So we can get rid of our reference photo. And for an underwater scene in Blender, the way I'll run it is, how we got time, 13 minutes, perfect. We'll take it, rotate it along the X a bit, and maybe I model a chain that sort of leads up to the top of the screen. So we'll start framing our shot, view, camera to view, where it can be a bit like this. We can have like a couple chain links leading up there. Perfect. So we'll need a ground plane, Alt G, scale it up. And I'm trying to do better with underwater scenes, so I'm happy I'm getting more of this practice in. GY, move it, we'll leave it, make the ground plane pretty big. Then what we can do is add a bunch of subdivision, simple, crank it up, or levels in the viewport, like 2, crank it up in the render, and add a displace, where is deform, displace, make a new texture in there, and I want it to be marble, perfect, and potentially even a couple more layers like that. Crank the strength way down, honestly even less, maybe 0.01, 0.02, and we'll attach it to an object coordinates, and we'll use an empty and select that empty plane axis. We'll select this empty as the object coordinates, because now what we can do is we can rotate the texture this way, scale it on the Z, and let's just see how it looks with like 6 subdivisions. Okay, looks like we need more. Tab, what's it, Control E, Control E, Control E, subdivide, and give me like a bunch of cuts. Yeah, we'll do like 9 cuts. Tab out of that. Okay, so now we can see that the scale is it's all wrong. So we'll have to scale it way up, and this is going to be our seabed, which I'm happy with it. Sure, can even turn the influence down even more on this to like 0.01, 0.005 even, 0.007. All right, that seems good to me. So that's going to be the seafloor, good enough. And then the anchor will be hanging by the chain. Yes, so to model the chain, let's add in a torus, G, RX, 90, object, shade smooth, can we move it up, scale it down, scale it around in the X just a bit, and then I will just come in from the top angle, line it up, rotate it by 90, and we'll just duplicate this. Awesome, we only need 3 links. So move it down, come to the side, move it down a bit, rotate along the Z by 90. Okay, and the fact that it should be a little taut if we're having it leaning a bit like that, so that's okay. Then for the materials, we can just join it. Oh, for the materials, we can just join this and apply our, call this anchor layout. And for this, let's just make this not visible in the display. Shading anchor, or no, anchor 01. So that looks good. Now we also want, because it's an underwater scene, we also want volumetric lighting. So we'll add a volume, not light probe. Let's add a cube, scale this up. It's encompassing our scene, to encompass our camera too. New material, we'll give it a principled volume, plug it into the volume, hop into this view, can turn the density down, give me like a 0.01 or 0.1, we'll call it 0.08 maybe, or it might even be interesting to add a noise texture, and in between that, we add in a map range from 0 to 1 to 0.2. Come on, let me control you. Save. So from 0 to 1 to, and it's not letting me control the map range node. So we'll just ditch this idea of controlling the density, and we'll just give this a color with RGB. Interesting. My node view is broken at the moment, so let's hop out of that, save, back to shading. Okay, this is not working. Okay, we're back. It's still bugging a little bit, and I'm wondering if it's because we're asking it to do a lot of work in rendered view. So we're gonna have to fly a little blind for a second, hop into rendered for a second, hop back out. Okay, that looks good to me. Now for shading, we also want the ground plane to have a sandy texture, sandy. And sand is what? Sand is yellowish. In fact, why don't we hide our volume, and we can hide even with these guys for a second, just so we can see how this looks. Or we'll add a noise texture and add in a mix color. So we'll use this as the factor, and we'll grab this color as our base, and then we can mix in some darker hue as the factor and scale up to like 100, maybe even 500. No, I think 500 should be appropriate. And we'll also use a similar noise texture with that at like 1000, and we'll add in a bump. We'll add in the bump node and use the factor of the noise as the height to have some normal data, and I'll hop back into solid view because it's very much slowing my computer down. Turn the strength down. I already know it's going to need to be lower at like 0.2 maybe. And with that, I think that should be good for the scene. How much time? 3 minutes. Maybe I'll add in a single kelp bush, maybe, or maybe it's worth it to add in our anchors and our chains, we'll add in object line art. So that's on the torus. So this line art modifier is on the torus 02, which is the chain. So then we'll also add another line art, object line art, hop into rendered view, save, and instead of hopping into rendered view rather, I want to just render the image and see how it looks and see what we need to change. All right, that looks disgusting, absolutely horrible. So how can we change what we saw there? Well, for one, I'm thinking we add in, I like the line art well enough. So I think we need more light though. So I'll change the sun to a strength of like 5 even. And then the sand, oof, it's looking rough. Let's render another image, see how it looks with a sunnier sun. Yeah, it's obvious what this is, but it just looks super bad. Maybe it'll be worth it in the shading to add for the anchor if we take the large noise texture and again a color ramp, and we'll do the same thing we did to the sand. We'll add in a bump, add the color as the height, plug that into the normal, and we can turn the strength down to this to like 0.5. Go and save that and can make it a bit, we'll lean less bumps, I guess. Render image, and the scale is all wrong for that, but it honestly looks somehow better. The sand looks super scuffed. We have a minute left, oh goodness. So I suppose we should add in our line art, but the way that has to happen is if we scale this down, then the camera will be able to see it, although I'm not sure if that'll even work. Render image. We have that image. That looks horrible. That is just horrendous, but that is pretty much all we're able to do in our 30 minutes today. As I just saw on my OBS, we have 20 seconds left and I am not at all happy with how this turned out. So you can see on this anchor, we have a bunch of artifacting here from the geometry and the normals, the way the normals are affecting the geometry. Again, it's all stretched out along the edges. You can see it also on the torus. It just doesn't look good at all. Number two, the sand, it does not look realistic at all. And similar, you can see like it's got these weird like soft patches and then weird like super detailed rough patches. I don't know what that's about. And it just looks bad, in general. So overall, we'll call it a failure of a challenge, but I suppose the goal of these is to learn. So with these critiques, that is going to be pretty much it. Thank you for watching. As always, leave a comment if you have a challenge for me. And with that, goodbye. See you in a minute.